Welcome to the first episode of the Dahlem Realty Company podcast. I'm your host, T. Gridge, and today we have a special lineup for you. Joining us are the dynamic duo and the owners of Dahlem Realty, Charlie and Jim Dahlem, along with the talented sales and leasing agent, Wes Elmore. In this episode, we will dive into the world of Dahlem Realty. We will talk about the history of Dahlem, market trends, success stories, and valuable tips for buyers, sellers, and investors alike. Whether you're a seasoned commercial real estate professional or a newcomer looking to navigate the market, this podcast will be your go-to resource for all things commercial real estate. So sit back, relax, and let's get ready to be inspired and informed by the expertise and passion of our guests. Let's jump right in. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Good.
Doing great.
Doing
well. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining me. Listen, I think the idea for this podcast is to let everyone know who and what Dahlem Realty does, and then give some advice, right? Dive deep into the subject, everything around commercial realty. That way, people that are interested in the subject, people that may want to learn more, people that are potentially interested in using you guys, understand what you guys do, and maybe we can give a little tips and tricks of the trade along the way. What do you guys think?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Charlie, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
Tell us about Dahlem Realty, how it came about. Give us the background.
Okay. Shortly going back to the beginning, my grandfather started a commercial industrial construction company in 1930.
1930. Okay.
And it was just, he was just, back then, 4th Street was the hub of retail activity.
Yep.
Okay. And he started renovating people's storefronts.
Okay.
Down on 4th Street. And over time, the construction company grew, and he actually developed Louisville's first retail strip center on the outskirts of town.
Okay.
That was at Baxter and Highland across from Jack Fry's.
Yeah. All right.
That was the outskirts of town, right?
Okay. Okay.
And Walgreens is still there. Walgreens was the original tenant.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the oldest Walgreens leases in the country. And, over time, we were a commercial and industrial construction company, and he would invest in various retail developments for himself.
Right.
And over time, the real estate company kind of evolved and grew, and in 1998, sold the construction company. I sold the construction company after 3 generations in that to the employees, and moved over with Jim and the real estate side, and here we are.
So cool. So I'm assuming your dad came on board at some point?
Yes, my dad was came out of college, was in the Navy, and then came back from the Navy, and he was an engineer. So he was heavily involved in the construction company, and the real estate company was just kind of over there. When they had excess profits, they'd go and build something for themselves. Right. And my dad was the one who really formalized it into a company. It was just, my grandfather would build a shopping center, and he'd call this insurance agent and insure it, and he'd build another one. He'd call that insurance agent to insure it.
Sure.
And Dad was like, we got to slam all this together,
right, sure.
and turn it into something.
One-stop shop.
Yeah. And so that was how it evolved.
So when did you two get involved?
I got involved in late 1990.
Okay. Now, was this right out of did you guys come from different careers, or was this kind of the first, you come right out of college, or how'd that work?
I came back in 91.
Okay.
And I'll go first because Jim's story is way more interesting. I went to Atlanta. A lot of my friends from college were going that direction, and it was a good way to kind of extend that fund, and I worked for a bank down there.
Gotcha. Okay.
So.
And I was interested in politics, so I did some internships in Washington, D.C. while I was in college, and got connected to some people, and was very fortunate when I came out of college. I got another small internship and job at the White House for President Reagan, and was on the advance team there. And then after that, I went to the Presidential Transition Office for Bush 41, and then to Senator McConnell's office, worked for Senator McConnell. And then after I came back to the company, This was right at the end of the Reagan administration, so it was 1988. So I was there for a year and a half, and then I came back, and the Reagan people had me back to do a few more advanced trips for them. One was going to Berlin, and then Nashville and other places. But no, it was a really interesting time, and was very fortunate.
You're
to have
not
those
kidding,
experiences.
Charlie. His story is a little bit more interesting.
Told you.
I mean, that is incredible. That could be a whole podcast in itself there, Jim, but that's pretty cool. All right. So tell us a little bit about what Dahlem Realty does today.
Well, we provide leasing and management services for shopping centers, industrial, and leasing for offices as well. We perform investment sales, both for the purchase and the sale side for our clients. And we have worked in the buy and sale of office buildings, multi-tenant properties, single-tenant properties, as well as industrial.
Okay, makes sense. Mm-hmm. So pretty much anything and everything when it comes to kind of commercial real estate, correct?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Pretty much. All right, I like it. So, Charlie, Jim, you guys are both deeply involved in the community, and your community involvement is pretty remarkable. What motivates each of you to prioritize community engagement?
I think, well, we're really blessed. Let's start there. And, we give back our time and money, I guess, to help other folks achieve their goals in life, give them an opportunity similar to the opportunities that we've had. I get a ton of fulfillment out of doing that. We're a third-generation family business. We grew up here in Louisville. Louisville's our home base, and we want a community and a region that thrives.
Now, Jim, you guys had pretty recently had a big to-do over at University of Louisville. Tell me a little bit about that.
At the University of Louisville for
that was the ribbon cutting for the structural engineering lab.
Okay. So that was actually the last gift that my father gave to the University of Louisville, and before he had passed away, and he was near and dear to the speed school was near and dear to his heart.
And that's what I was getting at. I know the speed school was part of that, right?
Right. Yeah. And basically, they needed some equipment to conduct experiments, if you will, on concrete.
All structural elements. The equipment they had was antiquated. Sorry to jump in.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The equipment they had was antiquated. I mean, some of the professors that were teaching there learned on that equipment that they had, and they desperately needed state-of-the-art structural tensioning and compression equipment, and it's not small stuff.
Okay.
And so they needed this lab. So like Jim said, they've got an area where they can mix concrete and they can give it different strengths, and they can see what happens to it when it gets into compression. Same with the steel, and they can see what point it fails.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's a game changer for the kids that are coming into the real world and designing these things.
That's awesome.
Previously, seed school, because of the antiquation of the equipment, they actually had to just do it in theory. It was all theoretical. So they had to explain to them how it would fail and everything like that, but they couldn't show them.
Gotcha.
So this is it's a cool piece of equipment.
That's pretty cool. And I know your father's name is on something there, right? On a building,
it's on that lab.
On that lab,
and that's yes, it's on that lab.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, that's something that's going to be there forever. I mean, it's a cool legacy.
Yeah, and then they named the lobby for my dad.
So awesome.
And mom.
Yep. And mom and dad, but the lobby over at Speed's named for him.
All right, let's dive into the industry here. And Wes, maybe you can jump in at this point here. What are some of the current trends and challenges that companies like Dahlem face in today's marketplace?
I mean, a lot of the stuff that you have right now is rates. I mean, rates are insane. Before they weren't as bad, obviously, but now they're starting to trend up. So you're starting to see a lot more people get a little less aggressive in trying to buy properties and stuff like that. So a lot of our stuff, we're seeing it trying to taper off a little bit. But, as that comes with construction costs being higher, I think you're starting to see a trend to go a different way.
Yeah, that goes also with inflation. You're talking about construction costs being higher. Everything's getting higher, and costs people to pull back on spending. Whether they're buying something, the consumers are pulling back. If you want to buy a cup of coffee, all of a sudden that shot up. Well, maybe I'll just pass on that, right?
Right.
So that's a trend that we're seeing. And here's a friend of mine. She's a massage therapist, and she said that the she has a number of friends of hers who are actually holding down 2 and 3 jobs right now, just because they need to make ends meet because of inflation, because of the cost of groceries, the cost of anything and everything out there. So it's a lot.
Everything's getting expensive these days. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess obviously it's no different in the real estate industry. I mean, it's everything's expensive to get into no matter what, whether it's getting a loan, buying property, whatever it may be, right?
It is, but you're starting to see some of our tenants. So like we rep Taco Bell,
Okay.
Arby's, stuff like that. What they're trying to do is being a little bit more creative in taking out or very much diminishing your drive-in or your walk-in. So you're more only drive-through only. So you need smaller spaces in order to do it. So the construction costs won't cost as much when you only have to build 1,400 square feet instead of 1,800 square feet.
That's
And you
interesting.
you don't have to staff it as much. You don't have to do stuff like that. So you're seeing them adjust to the times.
You know, and I think the other thing you're going to see in that industry, Wes, is a lot more AI. So I think you're going to see AI taking your order.
Absolutely.
There's going to be a lot more artificial intelligence as far as less bodies, smaller space. That does make sense. And I think that's probably where the fast food industry, if nothing else, is going for sure.
Absolutely.
Here in Louisville, we just did the Taco Bell on Brownsboro Road, and it is drive-through only. It's
So there's going to be no
now.
inside.
There is no inside. It's just drive-through only.
I mean, that's probably the future, honestly.
During COVID, you know, all the restaurants were their dining rooms were shut down. That's all they had, right? And they made a lot of money. And you know, you didn't have to clean the bathrooms, well, for the employees. But I mean, you didn't have the normal traffic you'd have in the bathrooms. You didn't have to clean the dining room area. You didn't have people coming back for 2 and 3 Cokes. You know, you just boom, you're through. You know, so why have the space? Why air condition the space? We were talking earlier. You know, typically the franchisee will make you refurb your space. Let's say every 15 years. So you got to buy all new booths, repaint, and all that kind of stuff. Well, you know, don't have to worry about that anymore.
Good point, because you don't have as many people inside.
And the square footage that you're air conditioning and the amount of real estate that you need to put the building on is less. I mean, you're just the whole thing shrinks.
You know,
expenses go down.
One of my next questions there was how has your industry changed since the pandemic? And Charlie, I think you mentioned at one point that retailers got a lot more efficient.
Right. Well, we can all talk about that, but yeah, I mean, they're rethinking their footprint, all of them, and they are focused on what they can do online because they know that people are going online for their product, and so they've got to get in there and play that game. If you're going to be someone who's going to be affected by Amazon, you got to get in and play the game and have nice. You got to have a retail presence, but it's going to be smaller because you're going to focus a lot on your online presence. Now, there's some Amazon-proof tenants that are out there, and I always talk about, you know, you can't get your nails done or your hair cut, you know, online.
So what is Amazon? So for our listeners that may not know, what does Amazon-proof mean?
Well, you want to take
something
that?
You can't order.
Yeah,
something you just can't order on Amazon.
I mean,
right?
we don't have to relate to this, but you still have to get your hair cut. These guys got to get their hair cut.
I do not have to relate to at all, but
but I mean, you still do have to have that. I mean, you know, they get their nails done. You still get food,
coffee shops.
So yeah, so until you know, Amazon doesn't do those services, so any of those
can't get a pizza to U of L hot from St. Matthews.
Yeah,
right.
Good point. That's right.
So you know, you got to have
stores in those locations.
Right.
So I'm assuming that's kind of where the whole strip malls, retail centers, they're going to more of the Amazon-proof models, correct?
You have a little bit of a mix. You have a mix, but I think the stronger ones are the ones that tend to be more service-oriented and offer those opportunities. And then, you know, in the strip centers, you've got a medical presence now. Sometimes you have a insurance office or you know, what have you, but you're seeing a lot of medical going into strip centers for convenience.
I mean, that's something that people always need, right? I mean, they've got to go in, whether it's immediate care center, doctors, dentists, wherever.
Right.
It makes sense.
So also, you know, when Amazon really came on, it made a huge surge. As a percentage of the market that they were taking, when they were making big jumps, people thought retail was going to die, right?
Okay.
And it didn't. And even Amazon realized that they needed to have an inline store presence. So it turned into a situation where the retail industry adapted and said, okay, we're going to have our own online presence as well.
Right.
So you can order it from us online, or you can come into the store and get it, or we can ship it to you if we don't have it from the store.
And then you can return it to the store.
Return it to the store. So all of a sudden it became even convenient. And also we're still a very tactile society.
Sure.
When you walk in, if I'm going to buy this computer that's sitting right in front of me right here, I know what I'm buying. I can go buy that online. Okay. But if you're going to go buy the shirt that I'm wearing, okay, if I'm going to buy this shirt, I might want to try that on.
Right.
I might want to see exactly if the medium fits me or not.
Yeah,
right.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So it's you can do that, but you might have to buy 2 or 3 of them.
Right. Right. And I don't actually, we just had an instance. My wife bought my daughter a field hockey glove that had some pads on it. Well, it's too big. So she got it from Amazon. But if we would have gone into a Dick's or Academy Sports, we would have tried it on and made sure it fits. So there's some value to that. So I certainly understand what you're saying there.
The other one is sometimes you want it now. You don't want to wait
You need it now.
2 days, 3 days for the shipping. So you do want it now. So there's still that demand.
Makes sense. Okay. So how do you guys set yourself apart from other commercial realty companies?
Well, we own properties ourselves, and we give advice to our clients as if we were the owners of their property or the property that they're planning to purchase. So if we have a client who's purchasing the property, we help them all the way through. We'll give them our opinion, and if we think they're walking into a bad situation, we're going to tell them that.
But that may cost you money, though, right, Jim?
Yeah, because we only get paid when the transaction gets done. But we're not going to encourage that client to close if we think that's going to be a bad situation for them. Now, I'm not saying that other brokers lead their clients into traps.
Right.
Okay, I'm not saying that at all. But I think we do a really good job of scrubbing deals for clients, giving them the advice they need to make an informed decision. Charlie and I have been doing this for over 30 years. And so we've seen a lot of scenarios, and that allows us to guide our clients to help them make the best decisions possible.
I think that's really well said. So share some notable success stories, some things that maybe have happened recently that you guys are proud of.
Well, let's see. Down in Elizabethtown, we were tasked with Hospice Health to help them find a building. They started what they call their PACE program. And I won't get into describing all of that, but it's new to Kentucky, and it's a new service that they're offering. And E-Town's tight right now with the battery plant coming in down there.
It's exploding.
It's crazy. And I looked, and I went back to this building, and it was sitting there. There were no signs on it. It's obviously vacant. So we have a computer program that we use, and we were able to just look up data on the property, and it had a mortgage on it from the Bank of Jamestown.
Okay.
So I called the Bank of Jamestown thinking maybe that they had repossessed it or something.
Right.
And left a message for the lender. And the next thing I know, the owner of the building over in Lexington's calling me saying, I heard you call the lender.
Okay.
So we had, had a conversation. They had invested in it, he and a couple of the guys, and they had plans for it. Long story short, I convinced them to sell it to Hospice.
Gotcha.
Now they did well on the building. That's fine. Hospice knew, but the location of the building is A++ for what Hospice is executing in E-Town. And recently there was a ribbon cutting there. They're open. The program is moving forward, and I think it's going to do really, really well. But you got to go. Sometimes you got to go to some weird places to try to find who owns a building and try to shake something loose. A similar situation over in Southern Indiana. We were tasked with a guy who was interested in owning his own office building and putting his business in it. And so Wes and I worked on that together. So this is something that we do. What we did was Wes, went online, drove the market, looked around for what was for lease, and I spent time, trying to look for something that we could shake loose that wasn't on the market. And so I'd heard that the guy that owned the building had died and his wife's in Florida.
Okay.
So I did an obituary search.
Oh, wow.
And found her name, and then I started searching her name in Florida, and I found about 5 of them. So I started leaving messages for all 5 of these ladies, and I got a call back.
Okay.
And ended up working with her CPA. Dean now owns the building. His business is in it. We leased it for him. There was maybe 1 or 2 tenants in the building. we were tasked to help him lease the building. Wes did that, so we did all the office leasing, and it was 100% full. He just had a tenant move out, and now he's called us back to lease that space.
I mean, that's the definition of above and beyond, right?
Well, it was a little different, but it worked.
It was creative.
Creative, and listen, and I get it, man. I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, to me, it sets you guys apart. That listen, we may be willing to do some of the small things that maybe some of the other people won't or don't.
Well, as Wes says, we can get online just like everybody else and go, here's what's available online.
Yeah, sure.
But it's like, well,
anybody can do that.
Right.
It's an important part, but it's sometimes that doesn't work. You got to go something else, whatever the client wants. You got to try to find it.
Yeah. So if it just doesn't exist online, well, it just doesn't exist. But in your all's mind, there's other ways to make that happen.
Absolutely.
Right. And those are just two examples of how you can make that happen.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty. Hey, listen, that's really kind of inspiring in a way. All right, so let's say you're an investor and you're interested in getting into kind of the retail space, maybe strip malls or whatever it may be. What advice would you have for them?
I think your first question you got to ask is, what's your risk tolerance? So how
much are you willing to
big
spend?
Are you willing to go in? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So and it vastly changes. Your other one would be, how involved do you want to be? If you just want to be, I just want to collect the check, you're probably looking more like a ground lease type thing, but your return on it's not anywhere near as good.
Okay.
Or do you want to go to a strip center that's maybe not as established and you're going to try to get it established? There's money that obviously has to be put into those deals. There's stuff like that, but there's big rewards potentially for what it is. So like I said, obviously risk tolerance is enormous.
Gotcha. And Wes, I heard you mention something that I had never thought about, but when you guys are helping your tenants or clients, whatever it may be, you guys are looking into police reports, traffic patterns, all kinds of different things to see what that area holds, correct?
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's something that I think, and maybe that's what everybody does in this particular industry, but to me, that again, that's really, really digging deep and making sure that you can take some of the guesswork out of it by doing those sort of things, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, you can take guesswork out of it, but there's the guesswork. You still have assumptions that you're making, and you got to figure that you got to understand that the assumptions that you're making are not likely to play out exactly how you're assuming it's going to play out.
Okay.
Meaning that if you're building a spreadsheet to take a look at a multi-tenant strip center, and you're thinking that all these tenants are going to be in there for the next 10 years,
Right.
because they all got 10-year leases. Not likely.
Yeah.
I mean, something's going to change.
Yeah.
Things change in your tenant's business and in their personal lives, and something gets derailed.
Sure.
And you got to understand that's what you're dealing with when you're managing and
part of the risk tolerance.
Owning commercial property. So it's the old the location. You hear that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But you're buying an income stream, and what you got to look at is the quality of the income stream, the quantity of it, and the duration of it, and then you can start to quantify what your risk is.
And I think that's what separates them from a lot of other ones. They are owners, so they know that risk and they've experienced that risk, and it's not always good. Sometimes there is bad in it, and there's negatives, there's downtimes.
Sure.
They know it. They know what to look for, and they know how to point the clients in that way as well.
Have you guys ever had a particular property where someone is going to move in and you guys just know it's not going to work?
Oh, yeah.
So where it's kind of like you understand, listen, we know this is a pretty short term because we understand you guys probably aren't going to last.
We just don't do the deal.
So that's
yeah, you just don't do the deal, and you're going to have more downtime because it's going to cost you more money in the future. Now we've had situations before where we had a tenant falsify their financial statement, and we put money into the property to get them in there, and they got 2 months free rent, and after 2 months they bankrupted the company.
Wow.
Yep.
Listen, so you guys have been there. You've done that, seen that, right?
My due diligence
We
list.
put a lot of money into that deal, and it just
tanked.
But
we were able to survive and get somebody else into that space.
Sure.
But my due diligence list, every time we do a deal, it grows because I learned something else that I need to look at, or that a client needs to look at, and so it just continues to expand.
We had a group in Tennessee they were a big medical pain management group.
Okay.
And they were the bomb. They had multiple locations.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, one day, the feds showed up.
Oh. Ooh, so they were doing something they weren't supposed to be.
And all their pain management clinics got shut down. And I'm pretty sure some people went to jail on it.
Okay.
And, that was, about 2 years into a 7-year lease, and we'd built all medical out for them, which is a lot of sinks and a lot of
a lot of smaller rooms,
and all of that. So that hurts. So you got to be able to have the tolerance to withstand that.
Yeah, sure.
And the ability to recover from it and move on. It's not pleasant, and nobody wants to talk about their losers, but everybody's got them. The good news is, you got to have more winners than losers, and the good news is we do.
Absolutely.
but you got to learn from the losers.
That's right.
There's some stuff that you just can't get around, and you got to understand that if somebody's going to lie to you or somebody's going to do something illegal, I mean, okay.
Listen, that's part of the risk tolerance, right? That's part of something you're dealing with. I mean, you got to know that kind of going in.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, I think that's pretty good advice. I mean, hearing these stories, if somebody's interested in getting this part in this industry, these are things you're going to have to deal with. So, like it or not. All right. So, how has technology affected your industry?
The easiest thing to say is it's just accelerated it so fast, just like really every industry. It's accelerated every industry.
Sure.
But, obviously you got the computer, you can do your demographics. It used to be that if you were going to go evaluate a piece of property and it was, over in Virginia or something like that, you have to drive over or fly over and get on the ground and go see it. Well, obviously you can Google Earth it and kind of get
you don't have to
a
do
little
that
bit of an idea.
Anymore.
I mean,
Sure.
ultimately you're going to do that.
Right.
But there may be something about it that you look at that disqualifies the property as an investment, and you move on, and that's it. It's over. You didn't have to spend the time and the money to go do that. It used to be that in order to sign a lease, everybody had to have a wet signature. So you'd sign 3 leases, you'd overnight it to somebody, and 5 days later the deal would get done. Well, now we just DocuSign.
Yep.
Right.
It's all done
and
through
it's
email.
done. And it's done. And that's acceptable in the court of law.
Makes sense.
Right. And so that boom, accelerates the deal. What's the next thing that's going to happen down the road? I don't know. I mean, we were talking earlier. It was pretty cool. I was in college and working in our construction company, and we got a fax machine. I was like, what's that?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was telling my son that I had a pager not long ago, and he was like, "What is that?"
Yeah,
had no idea. 14 years old, no clue what a pager is.
Right.
So it's amazing how quickly that.
Can he
goes
operate a rotary dial phone? Or
wouldn't
does he
have
just,
any idea.
just
No clue. You put that in front of him, it would be it'd be Chinese. He'd have no idea where to go. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the other thing that's happening is the demand for square footage is less with technology because people can digitize things, so you don't need to have all the files around. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have one tenant currently. They were in almost 3,000 square feet, and they were a financial institution, so they used to have the rollaway files and everything else. Well, now their lease is up. They're like, well, we don't need this. We need half of this because everything's digitalized. So we're actually moving them another part of our strip center. But
what about people working from home? Is that something you think's here to stay? Are you guys seeing that?
I think it depends on the industry.
Depends on who it is, what it is. Because I know a lot of people went back to the office, but listen, there's still a bunch of people that still do a lot remotely that had not happened before the pandemic. Sure. So I'm assuming that kind of affects commercial real estate as well because there's less people in an office and you don't need as big of a space. I know there's some people right around the corner from us. They're moving to a smaller space because they got a bunch of people working from home. I get that. So I'm just curious if that's something to keep in mind moving forward or not.
I think it's a trend. I think you're seeing some of that. Yeah, I think you've got to take a look at also the surrounding support services around these big offices and office spaces, let's say downtowns. If they don't have people down there, then the places to go get lunch, they're going to close. Right. So that's going to impact that sector of the real estate market. Right. And then if they're staying at home, well, they may want to go out. So if they're staying at home and they live in the suburbs, that area is going to thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Somebody's running up the street to get a sandwich at that lots of pasta in St. Matthews instead of eating downtown.
Right.
So they're benefiting.
Yeah. So there's some give and take there, but as downtown is not benefiting, it's kind of a detriment to them. Some of these other areas may be benefiting, depending on kind of where people are at.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, so 2 more, then we'll wrap up podcast number 1. What are some of the common misconceptions about property investments?
I would say one of the biggest ones is people think it's really glamorous, that you simply buy a property and a check shows up in the mail and you go on down the road. Now, some cases that does happen if you have a freestanding building that's on a ground lease and you think McDonald's or Starbucks that are there to Chick-fil-A, where you're getting what is really called mailbox money, where the tenant takes care of everything, and the owner doesn't have really any responsibilities. But if you have multi-tenant property, there's so much more to it. And even with that single-tenant property, at some point in time, something's going to change with that tenant, whether it's their lease is coming up for renewal, and you're going to need to either renew it, you're going to need to be in touch with the market, or they leave. If they leave, you're going to have to hire somebody like us, or be very in touch with the market yourself in order to get that space released or repurposed, get that property repurposed. So that's one of the misconceptions of real estate. Yeah.
Makes sense. Wes, what would you say about that?
I think everybody thinks every deal is the same, and it's not. Like he said, some work this way, some work that. Every one of them work a different way. And even if they look the same, they're still different.
Right.
There's a clause in a lease, so there's this. You really got to read every single fine print of every lease of what it is. Because Chick-fil-A's reads a lot different than McDonald's, believe it or not. That they're all just different.
Interesting.
And you got to be creative. I mean, especially through COVID. Talk a little bit about your experience with working with our tenants through COVID.
Yeah, so obviously COVID, no one had any knowledge that was going to happen or how to even deal with it.
Sure.
So a lot of
long-range planning was what's going to happen tomorrow.
Met when it first happened and said, look, let's just get with every one of our tenants if they call us, or let's just call them if they don't call us, and just say, how can we help?
Right.
Before it ever gets different ways. And we had 3 different tenants that had called us and said, we're done. Here's our keys. We can't do this anymore. There's no way.
Right.
And we just said, well, hold on. What can you pay now?
Right.
And how can you pay in the future and stuff like that? And actually, all 3 tenants end up paying.
It all worked out. They're still there?
In under 6 months. Yeah.
Oh, that's
while
pretty
during
cool.
COVID. So.
Yeah, we had one tenant in particular that said, we can't believe you're calling us. We can't get landlords to pick up the phone and or return our phone calls.
Good point. They're just trying to dodge you.
But
Yeah.
you all, call some of these companies just said, nope, you got an obligation, you pay, or we're going to sue you.
And we work for Sport Clips, and we had that. They asked us on a couple to, hey, will you call our landlord and let's see what we can do? And they were bigger landlords. The answer was no. This is your obligation. Pay it.
Yeah, sorry.
And that was it. And I mean, some of them closed. And
but that's the kind of stuff that you got to be prepared to do and be nimble, and just understand that there are going to be times where you need to sit down and work with a tenant to ensure their success, because you got to remember there's going to be downtime. You're not getting reimbursement for your reimbursables, and what I mean by reimbursables is everybody pays their pro rata of snow removal, for instance.
Right.
Well, guess what? If a tenant's not there, you're eating that.
Yep.
So it's just, you got to, you want to make sure their success and our success go hand in hand.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, last question. And listen, I understand this might be a difficult one, but I think this is something that, people think about and kind of wonder about all the time. So how do you see the future of certain segments of commercial real estate evolving over the next 10 to 15 years?
My crystal ball is very foggy on that one. I've tried, say 10 to 15 years, you look at how fast things have changed in the past 5 years. It's really hard to tell.
No telling, right?
It's
Jim?
really hard to tell. But, the big talk right now is artificial intelligence. What is that going to do?
AI
What does that do
world,
to our industry? And I'm doing a lot of reading on that right now just to figure out what this means. Mm-hmm. And so it's just very difficult to tell. I think we've touched on some of it. With shrinking footprints for tenants and the like, but it's just going to be really hard to tell.
I think malls is a big one right now. Especially your small town malls. You're starting to see them dwindle down. Even E-Town, theirs is down to almost nothing. Whatever. I think you're going to start seeing those kind of work their way out.
So Wes, you guys explained to me once before that there's 3 segments of malls. There's an A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. Explain that to our listeners.
So like Mall of America would be like your A.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're safe for the time being. Your B, I think, is probably your Oxmoor of the world.
Okay,
around here.
so like your middle-sized mall.
Yeah. And then your C's are your small towns. Like I said, E-Town obviously before, but their E-Town mall, I think you're going to see that one. kind of dwindling this down. I mean, you've seen Jefferson Mall is not looking like a mall anymore either.
Good point.
But
Sure.
they put a BJ's in the front, which is not a mall tenant. You're
Right.
starting to put other ones. So I think you're starting to see those adjust. in that
My,
way.
my in-laws live in Columbia, Tennessee. There's not a single tenant at the mall that's in Columbia, Tennessee anymore.
It's all just vacant.
It's vacant.
What's going to happen to that place? And I think you see that around the country. You see people, gangs are moving into these places, all kinds of crazy stuff.
You're also seeing lifestyle centers come out of some. So I was in Columbus, Ohio, not too long ago for a conference, and that's the way theirs was. They had took an old mall and they redeveloped it and made it this outdoor lifestyle center, kind of like I guess the Summit on steroids.
Oh, that's
what it
cool.
looked like. So, like I said, they're getting very creative in what they're doing.
They're going to have
You
to.
can reuse parts of it and then do these outdoor corridors, cover some corridors, and just retask the space. Again, a lot of the small space is some pretty big space. And getting back to what we were saying earlier is that you've got people aren't carrying those inventories in their space anymore,
Right.
And they're having it brought in when they need it and just in time, all that. And so you got to resize your space.
It's an interesting you bring that up. And listen, I don't want to get too local here because I think we're going to get a lot of national listeners. But here in town, there was a Topgolf built on the back end of what we call Oxmoor Mall. And then they created a kind of an outdoor space and some nice restaurants and a putt shack and really kind of developed kind of the back end of where there used to be a Sears. Is that something you're going to see a lot more of, you think?
Well, they created an entertainment venue.
Right.
So the entertainment venue is to draw foot traffic.
Yep.
Okay, so yes, I think you have to repurpose your malls in order to draw that foot traffic now, where you have the large boxes like the Sears of the world. They aren't coming back. You're not seeing anybody come in and replace them. So you have to do something creative to make that happen, and it's worked out really well for Oxmoor. Knew it would, but they really needed that. That was really necessary to have
absolutely.
happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Ford was parking trucks back there.
Yeah. It was just a
That's-
parking
It
lot.
was just a parking lot where just a bunch of
Right.
Inventory.
trucks that had just come off the line.
People are going to have to get creative, to your all's point. They're going to have to figure out different ways to create the foot traffic and to create some engagement and some entertainment and just get people on property.
Right.
Makes sense. Gentlemen, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us for the Dahlem Realty Company podcast #1. We will be back next month with an engaging guest diving into the world of commercial real estate.